Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be showing you how to make a corset top. On the paper now I have my bust line, my under bust and my waistline. My bust line is 10, my under bust is 13 and my waist is 16, and I added 1 inch allowance. So now I'm just going to draw my shoulder line. My shoulder is 16, so I'm marking 8, and then I'm going to draw the line down by 1 inch for the shoulder slant. And then I will also measure 3 inches for the neckline, although you don't really necessarily need the neckline. You don't need it at all. You don't need it at all. It's just for formalities. So I'm also going down on my bust line to measure 8 inches so that my line is straight. 8 inches is also the measurement for the shoulder line. So I'm just going to rule them, matching each other. So guys, now I'm going to be adding the bust span measurements, which is also called the nipple to nipple measurement. Mine is 4, so I'm going to mark it up my bust line, my under bust, and my waistline. Also on my allowance, because it has to be equal. So I'm going to measure 1/2 inch between the lines. So between from your under bust, your waist, and the allowance. You don't necessarily have to use put the allowance. You can just put it while you are cutting, but then I prefer to put my allowance so that my lines are straight. So I'm just going to rule along those lines. So I'm going to use a curved ruler to curve out my line from the bust to the under bust. You shouldn't use a straight line because it's don't just use a straight line. It's not good. You're not supposed to do that because your bust is not straight, it's curved. So yeah, I'm just going to flip it and then curve it. Now on my shoulder line, I'm going to divide my shoulder line by 2. Whatever I get, I mark it, and then rule my line from the midpoint, which is half of my shoulder line, down to my bust line. And then I'm going to also measure half of that line. I had 9.5, so I measured half of that line. On the midpoint of that line, there's across the shoulder and the bust. I'm going to measure 1 inch on both sides and then use my curved ruler along the lines of my bust to the midpoint where I measured my 1 inch. And I'm just going to curve it on both sides. Now I'm going to take my bust span. So your bust span is the inches between your bust and your under bust. So my bust line is 10 and my under bust is 13. So we have 3 inches between that. So I'm just going to mark 3 inches all around my bust. So you're not putting your ruler on your under bust on your bust. So I'm marking 3 inches around my bust, so it's going to be like a full circle. So at this point, I measured 0.75 above my bust line and then 0.5 across that line, from that line to the midpoint. That's what is measured there. You'll see more of that later in the video. So under my bust line, across my armhole, close to my armhole, under my armhole, I'm going to measure 0.75 also. I'm measuring that so I can sort of shape my neckline to what I want. So that's what I'm doing right now. So I'm just using a pencil so that in case I make mistakes, I don't use a marker and then the paper is messed up. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. I went a little bit above my 0.75. So later on, I still use 0.75. So you can go 0.5, 0.75. You don't necessarily have to do it exactly as I did. You're just going to shape it according to your choice and what you want. So I'm also going to take 1 inch on that line. So what you're going to do is measure, as you can see what I'm doing right now, from that point to your bust point to that circle, you're going to measure 1 inch, and then I'm now going to use a curved ruler to trace it down to, so I'm tracing it down to the dot line. So I'm also going to do same. So I'm going to also shape the neckline of the inner bust. So I'm just going to use my free hand. You could use your curved ruler. As you can see, there is that line where I am ruling right now is the 0.5 inch, and going down is 0.75. So I'm going to use my pencil and then just cover out the neckline to what I desire. You could go above if you don't want to reveal much, but then I'm okay with where my line is. from this line, I'm going to be measuring 2 inches, and then on that line, I'm measuring 2 inches. And I come into the midpoint, which is where the dot line is. I'm going to be measuring 2.5 inches on both sides. So I'm going to be inserting my measurements now on my pattern. So my bust line, I have 9.5 inches, and then my under bust is 8.5 inches. My waist is 8.5 inches also, and I'm going to put the same thing on my allowance. My waist is 8.5. So I'm going to use ruler. I'm also going to mark it here too. 8.5. So this is what it is looking like. So coming to the back of the corset, I have the same thing I had in the front: my bust line, my under bust, my waistline, and my allowance. So I'm going to be marking my shoulder point down with 1 inch. I didn't mark the 3 inches for the neckline. I just ruled along because I don't really need it at all. So I don't need it as much as I needed it for the front. So I'm going to be inserting the 8 inches down on the bust line and rolling it up. So I'm going to bring in the front pattern, and then I'm going to mark where my armhole begins on my front pattern. So I'm just going to mark that. You can just easily measure it instead of marking. You can either mark or measure, but marking makes it more, whichever one works for you is fine. I marked it and at the same time measure so that I'll be double sure that so I don't get a wrong measurement. After placing my armhole measurement, I'm going to go ahead to put in my darts. So I'm using my nipple to nipple measurement as I used in the front. I'm going to be measuring 4 inch, which is my bust span, and then I'm going to be taking 1/2 inch on both sides as I did for my front pattern. The same measurements I'm using on my waist is the same I'm using on my allowance as I did in the front pattern. So I'm going to rule my line across my from my allowance to my waist straight, and then from my waist to my bust, I'm going to angle my line more like a triangle. Yeah, so I'm drawing a straight line from my waist to my bust and then angling it from the ½ inch that I collected for the dots. So I hope you guys can see what I'm doing. So I've done that. So now I'm going to be adding my side measurements. So as usual, my bust is 9.5, my under bust is 8.5, my waist is 8.5, and my allowance is 8.5. So coming to the neckline of the back, what I was trying to say here was you can either make your back straight or curved. So I'm going to show you what is going to look like straight and what is going to look like curved. And to do that, you can either go down as low as down to your under bust line, the way I showed just now. But then I measured a line. I'm trying to still show you what a curved line will look like at your back. So here I'm going to be going down. I measured the line between my now bust line to, I'm sorry about that. So I'm measuring the line between my now bust line, which is 2 inches, and then I just went down by 1 inch. Yeah, so it won't be at the same level. You could do it at the same level, but I usually like the back of my corset to be a little bit lower. So this is me showing you what it's looking like, what's going to look like curved. So I showed you guys what is looking like curved and what is looking like straight, and I picked one that I liked. So this is what it looks like straight. You're going to straighten your hand a little bit from your dart to the center back, so it doesn't, because the curve ruler I'm using is not my pattern master, so it's just an ordinary curved ruler. So this is me showing you the straight line. The straight line is really easy to to draw, so it's just a straight line. And then I think the straight line is actually better, so I decided to use the straight line for this particular tutorial. You can go with whatever you want. You can go as low as lower under your under bust. People go as low as that, so it's your preference. Some people just leave it along the bust line and making it equal to the armhole measurement. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. So yes, and as you know, in corsets, if you're going to be using your eyelets, you're not going to have your full back. So I'm taking 1.5 inch on the back to cut it out, because I'm going to be using a string at the back, so I don't need all of that. You can cut as low as 1 inch. Some people just cut out from the darts and they don't add anything. So from that dart point, the side back, they just add their eyelets, and then yeah. But I like to have my back a bit bigger than just having my side back. I like to have a little bit of my center back, so I just took 1.5 inch there. So I'm just trying to mark the pattern, although we'll be cutting this out. So you guys should watch out for part 2. I'm going to be cutting the pattern out, and I'm going to be showing you how to sew it. So make sure to watch the video. At this point, I forgot to make my dart point for my upper bust a bit wider, so that's what I'm doing. So I took 0.5 on both sides, but then ideally you can take 0.75 on your side front, and then 0.5 on your center front. But then I took 0.5 on both sides. That's what I did. So ideally that's what you should do. I forgot to do that, but then it still worked out well for me. But I think you should do that 0.75 on your side front and 0.5 on your center front. You are doing the 0.5 on your side front and 0.75 on your side front and 0.5 on your center front. This is to avoid gaping. There is this thing that happens when you don't give enough dart to the upper bust of the cup of your corset. There's a way it's gaps. So this is to avoid the gaping of your bra cup. So yes, guys, this is going to be all for this part. This is the part 1. So part 2 is going to be coming out. So please watch out for it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.